Picture a battlefield. It's inherently chaotic, right? Just flooded with rapidly changing conditions. So how in the world do you command thousands of troops across land, sea, and air without the whole thing descending into utter confusion? Well, the United States military does it by relying on some deeply structured, absolutely time-tested planning frameworks. Welcome to this explainer. We're going to dive right into exactly how they pull this off. All right, here's our game plan for today. We'll start with the anatomy of planning, then move to the joint planning process, followed by the military decision-making process. After that, we'll hit troop leading procedures and wrap up with adapting to modern warfare. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the anatomy of planning. You know, military planning is really this precise blend of art and science used to solve some incredibly ill-structured problems. Ultimately, it's all about translating high-level national objectives into synchronized tactical actions. And they do this by strictly aligning three things. First, your ends, that's the what and the why. Second, your ways, which are your methods of execution. And third, your means, literally the resources you have available. Think of it like a three-legged stool. If those three elements are out of balance, the whole plan just falls apart. At its core, the goal of all these frameworks is to reduce uncertainty and improve the quality of decisions. Look, the point isn't to create some perfect, flawless plan that predicts the future, because as the saying goes, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. The real goal, it's just to clear the fog of war enough so you can scale decision-making in incredibly high-stakes environments. Moving right along to Section 2, the joint planning process. Now, at the absolute highest level, strategy is developed at the U.S. government department level. The Joint Planning Process, or JPP, is what supports the critical interaction between senior civilian leadership, like the President and the Secretary of Defense, and the combatant commanders. Basically, it's the ultimate macro method used to synchronize the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines into one massive, cohesive theater-level force. So the JPP flows logically across 7 steps. It picks off with planning initiation, which is triggered the moment leadership recognizes a potential crisis, and it goes all the way through to plan or order development. But the real key takeaway here is the disciplined civilian-military dialogue. Planners are constantly identifying risks, estimating costs, and adapting on the fly to provide viable military options. All right, zooming in a bit, we hit Section 3, the military decision-making process. So, how exactly do battalions and brigades orchestrate these super complex maneuvers? Well, they use the 7-step military decision-making process, or MDMP. After analyzing the mission, the staff develops multiple courses of action. And step 4 is where it gets really interesting, wargaming. This is where the staff rigidly simulates friendly maneuvers against predicted enemy threats step by step, just to identify any friction points before actual execution. Finally, the commander compares these options and produces the orders. Now, there is a really sharp contrast between the heavy MDMP and what happens down at the smaller unit level. MDMP relies heavily on a formal, specialized staff. We're talking intelligence officers, logistics experts, and honestly, it can take days to complete. But company-level and smaller units, they don't have large staffs. They have to be highly dynamic, which means they require a completely different framework. Which brings us perfectly to Section 4, Troop Leading Procedures. Down in the dirt, small unit leaders like platoon leaders and company commanders use these 8 dynamic steps known as TLP to survive and execute in fast-paced combat. Now, unlike the rigid, sequential nature of higher-level planning, the TLP sequence isn't strictly rigid at all. A leader might issue a warning order, immediately initiate movement, and conduct reconnaissance, all concurrently just to save precious time. It is entirely leader-driven, maximizing whatever limited time they have to get their troops ready to go. And speaking of time, it is literally the most critical asset here, which brings us to an absolutely brilliant concept, the 1/3, 2/3 rule. The military dictates that a commander must strictly limit their own planning time to just 1/3 of the total available time. That means the remaining 2/3 is deliberately handed over to subordinate units so they have maximum time to actually prepare and rehearse. To actually make that 1/3, 2/3 rule work, the military uses something called parallel planning. As soon as a leader receives a mission, they immediately push out a quick warning order, or warnord. This gives the troops just enough basic information, like the type of operation and the general location, to start packing their gear, drawing ammo, and doing their own prep. And they're doing all of this while the commander is still locked in a room finalizing the detailed plan. I mean, it's the ultimate efficiency multiplier in a really time-constrained environment. Finally, let's look at the future in Section 5, Adapting to Modern Warfare. To adapt these century-old frameworks to the blinding speed of 21st century multi-domain warfare, modern planners are increasingly leaning on advanced technology. Recent doctrinal discussions highlight integrating artificial intelligence right into the MDMP. So instead of a staff officer spending hours poring over giant paper maps, AI can rapidly process intelligence and run predictive modeling during that wargaming phase. It evaluates options way faster and significantly reduces human bias. The fundamentals, they remain exactly the same, but the speed of processing is accelerating exponentially. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today, all the way from the Pentagon down to the frontline platoon. But I really want you to consider how you can steal these military strategies for your own civilian teams or business. Are you hoarding all the planning time, or could you implement that 1/3, 2/3 rule to empower your subordinates? Could you use a structured framework to align your ends, ways, and means to cut through your own daily fog of war? These battle-tested tools are right there, just waiting for you to use them. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.